Our road and the rickshaw came to a dead stop under a pine clad, overhanging shale cliff. Instinctively I halted too, giving my reason. Heatherly rapped out an oath. "Now, if you think I'm going to spend a cold night on the hillside for the sake of a stomach cum brain cum eye illusion Lord mercy! What's that?" There was a muffled report, a blinding smother of dust just in front of us, a crack, the noise of rent boughs, and about 10 yards of the cliffside, pines, undergrowth and all, slid down into the road below, completely blocking it up. The uprooted trees swayed and tottered for a moment like drunken giants in the gloom, and then fell prone among their fellows with a thunderous crash. Our 2 horses stood motionless and sweating with fear. As soon as the rattle of falling earth and stone had subsided, my companion muttered, "Man, if we'd gone forward we should have been 10 feet deep in our graves by now. There are more things in heaven and earth. Come home, Pansay, and thank God. I want a peg badly." We retraced our way over the church ridge, and I arrived at Dr. Heatherly's house just after midnight. His attempts toward my cure commenced almost immediately, and for a week I never left his sight. Many a time in the course of that week did I bless the good fortune which had thrown me in contact with Simla's best and kindest doctor. Day by day my spirits grew lighter and more equable. Day by day, too, I became more and more inclined to fall in with Heatherly's spectral illusion theory, implicating eyes, brain, and stomach. I wrote to Kitty, telling her that a slight sprain caused by a fall from my horse kept me indoors for a few days, and that I should be recovered before she had time to regret my absence. Heatherly's treatment was simple to a degree. It consisted of liver pills, cold water baths, and strong exercise, taken in the dusk or at early dawn; for, as he sagely observed, a man with a sprained ankle doesn't walk a dozen miles a day, and your young woman might be wondering if she saw you. At the end of the week, after much examination of pupil and pulse, and strict injunctions as to diet and pedestrianism, Heatherly dismissed me as briskly as he had taken charge of me. Here is his parting benediction: "Man, I can certify to your mental cure, and that's as much as to say I've cured most of your bodily ailments. Now get your traps out of this as soon as you can, and be off to make love to Miss Kitty." I was endeavoring to express my thanks for his kindness. He cut me short. "Don't think I did this because I like you. I gather that you've behaved like a blackguard all through. But, all the same, you're a phenomenon, and as queer a phenomenon as you are a blackguard. No," checking me a second time, "not a rupee, please. Go out and see if you can find the eyes, brain, and stomach business again. I'll give you a lakh for each time you see it." Half an hour later I was in the Mannerings' drawing room with Kitty, drunk with the intoxication of present happiness and the foreknowledge that I should never more be troubled with its hideous presence. Strong in the sense of my new-found security, I proposed a ride at once, and, by preference, a canter round Jakko. Never had I felt so well, so overladen with vitality and mere animal spirits, as I did on the afternoon of the 30th of April. Kitty was delighted at the change in my appearance, and complimented me on it in her delightfully frank and outspoken manner. We left the Mannerings' house together, laughing and talking, and cantered along the Chota Simla road as of old. I was in haste to reach the Sanjoli Reservoir, and there make my assurance doubly sure. The horses did their best, but seemed all too slow to my impatient mind. Kitty was astonished at my boisterousness. "Why, Jack," she cried at last, "you are behaving like a child. What are you doing?" We were just below the convent, and from sheer wantonness I was making my Waler plunge and curvet across the road as I tickled it with the loop of my riding whip. "Doing?" I answered. "Nothing, dear. That's just it. If you'd been doing nothing for a week except lie up, you'd be as riotous as I. Singing and murmuring in your feastful mirth, joying to feel yourself alive. Lord over nature, lord of the visible earth, lord of the senses five." My quotation was hardly out of my lips before we had rounded the corner above the convent, and a few yards further on could see across to the Sanjoli. In the center of the level road stood the black and white liveries, the yellow paneled rickshaw, and Mrs. Keith Wessington. I pulled up, looked, rubbed my eyes, and, I believe, must have said something. The next thing I knew was that I was lying face downward on the road with Kitty kneeling above me in tears. "Has it gone, child?" I gasped. Kitty only wept more bitterly. "Has what gone, Jack dear? What does it all mean? There must be a mistake somewhere, Jack, a hideous mistake." Her last words brought me to my feet, mad, raving for the time being. "Yes, there is a mistake somewhere," I repeated. "A hideous mistake. Come and look at it." I have an indistinct idea that I dragged Kitty by the wrist along the road up to where it stood, and implored her for pity's sake to speak to it, to tell it that we were betrothed, that neither death nor hell could break the tie between us, and Kitty only knows how much more to the same effect. Now and again I appealed passionately to the terror in the 'rickshaw to bear witness to all I had said, and to release me from a torture that was killing me. As I talked, I suppose I must have told Kitty of my old relations with Mrs. Wessington, for I saw her listen intently with white face and blazing eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Pansay," she said. "That's quite enough. Syce gora lao." The Syces, impassive as Orientals always are, had come up with the recaptured horses, and as Kitty sprang into her saddle I caught hold of the bridle, entreating her to hear me out and forgive. My answer was the cut of her riding whip across my face from mouth to eye, and a word or two of farewell that even now I cannot write down. So I judged, and judged rightly, that Kitty knew all, and I staggered back to the side of the 'rickshaw. My face was cut and bleeding, and the blow of the riding whip had raised a livid blue wheal on it. I had no self-respect. Just then Heatherly, who must have been following Kitty and me at a distance, cantered up. "Doctor," I said, pointing to my face, "here's Mrs. Mannering's signature to my order of dismissal, and I'll thank you for that lock as soon as convenient." Heatherly's face, even in my abject misery, moved me to laughter. "I'll stake my professional reputation," he began. "Don't be a fool," I whispered. "I've lost my life's happiness, and you'd better take me home." As I spoke, the 'rickshaw was gone. Then I lost all knowledge of what was passing. The crest of Jakko seemed to heave and roll like the crest of a cloud, and fall in upon me. 7 days later, on the 7th of May, that is to say, I was aware that I was lying in Heatherly's room as weak as a little child. Heatherly was watching me intently from behind the papers on his writing table. His first words were not encouraging, but I was too far spent to be much moved by them. "Here's Miss Kitty has sent back your letters. You corresponded a good deal, you young people. Here's a packet that looks like a ring, and a cheerful sort of note from Mannering Papa, which I've taken the liberty of reading and burning. The old gentleman's not pleased with you." "And Kitty?" I asked dully. "Rather more drawn than her father, from what she says. By the same token, you must have been letting out any number of queer reminiscences just before I met you. Says that a man who would have behaved to a woman as you did to Mrs. Wessington ought to kill himself out of sheer pity for his kind. She's a hot-headed little virago, your Mash. We'll have it, too, that you were suffering from D.T. when that row on the Jakko road turned up. Says she'll die before she ever speaks to you again." I groaned and turned over to the other side. "Now you've got your choice, my friend. This engagement has to be broken off, and the Mannerings don't want to be too hard on you. Was it broken through D.T. or epileptic fits? Sorry I can't offer you a better exchange unless you'd prefer hereditary insanity. Say the word and I'll tell 'em it's fits. All Simla knows about that scene on the Ladies' Mile. Come, I'll give you 5 minutes to think it over." During those 5 minutes I believe that I explored thoroughly the lowest circles of the inferno which it is permitted man to tread on earth. And at the same time I myself was watching myself faltering through the dark labyrinths of doubt, misery, and utter despair. I wondered, as Heatherly in his chair might have wondered, which dreadful alternative I should adopt. Presently I heard myself answering in a voice that I hardly recognized. "They're confoundedly particular about morality in these parts. Give 'em fits, Heatherly and my love. Now let me sleep a bit longer." Then my two selves joined, and it was only I, half crazed, devil-driven I, that tossed in my bed, tracing step by step the history of the past month. "But I am in Simla," I kept repeating to myself. "I, Jack Pansay, am in Simla, and there are no ghosts here. It's unreasonable of that woman to pretend there are. Why couldn't Agnes have left me alone? I never did her any harm.